Hey, David T.S. Wood here, and welcome to my Extra Mile. Our comment winner is PGH Deal. I'm not sure what your name is, but so thank you so much for sharing your current conflicts and actively working through the resolutions. And he said it's very easy for folks to think because you're a coach on a specific topic that you're not struggling with that specific topic or issue. So thank you so much for your comment and for being the comment winner. And the show today, well, what can I say? This couple are a power couple, incredibly successful, incredible parents, beautiful friends, great relationships. But they have a system, a 4-step system, and that they utilize in every single area of their life to really identify and overcome obstacles that stand in the way of them designing the life that they want. But they also use this 4-step system with very, very simple things they do on a daily basis. It's very beautiful. It's a great system to implement, and you're definitely going to be taking notes, so enjoy the show. Please subscribe, push the like button, and get involved with the conversation. With this one, you may have a lot of questions come from it, so don't be afraid to ask questions. We'll get them back on the show to answer them, and we'll definitely see you on the other side. Enjoy this incredible show with the beautiful Shawn and Kari-Lyn Owens. So I was sort of reminded of a quote, which is by Randy Pausch. And Randy Pausch, if you've never watched Randy did a video called The Last Lecture. And in the video, he talks about the obstacles are not there to keep us out. The obstacles are there to see how badly we really want something. And, Kari-Lyn and Shawn, I've watched you and doing the work I do, I see a lot of ideas, philosophies, techniques come and go. But what I notice a lot is people learn something, but never really adopt and apply and bring it into sort of like a way of being. It sort of stays for a bit, and then there's another thing that comes and goes, and another thing that comes and goes. But you work with a business coach that imparted on you a principle which you have not only adopted in your personal life, in the way you're raising your children, in the way you're building your business, in the way that you're duplicating your teams, but it's sort of embedded in your DNA now. So I just wanted I'll start with you, Shawn. The principle is called WOOP. I wonder if you can just give us the elevator version. So someone listening right now wants to hang on to the edge of their seat and wait till the end to get all the goodness out of it.
Yeah. Very simply, our business coach did offer this platform to us to be able to use like a structure, I guess, in really identifying the things that we really want in our life, but then also going through a process of how to accomplish those things, and the things that might stand in our way. And it's not a her thing. She didn't create it. It's actually something that you can find online. And it's been around for a while, but not wildly used. And it was designed by a woman by the name of Gabrielle Autogen. I don't know if I've said that exactly right. She's German.
It's called Gabby. That's called Gabby.
Yeah, let's call her Gabby, right? So, but you could look it up on the internet. But it's really, like any shiny star, any little thing that you can do. It's about application more than it's about seeing it and thinking, yeah, that's a cool thing. It's really bringing it into your life and using the tool. So we found that it's a very simple 4-step system that identifies what our ultimate wish is. What is the thing that we really want? What is our greatest outcome from accomplishing that wish? So really bringing what we want into a visual sense, or into a that we feel what it would be like to have accomplished that wish. And all the impact that it might have. But then really, most importantly, what we find in the work that we do with our clients and customers is, what is the obstacles that stand in our way? Like, what are the things that are going to prevent? Because a lot of times that's the painful piece that we want to avoid. We want to make it seem like when we help people set goals that it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies and nothing's going to stand in our way. We're just going to climb the mountain. But inherently, you talked about at the very beginning, you talked about that quote, in that as soon as we create a grand thing that we want to accomplish, something stands in our way, or an obstacle shows up. And we always we always laugh because every time we make a big decision in our life, it's like the universe has conspired against us to throw all these things in our way to really see how badly we want it. So the obstacle is always the big conversation. So if we know the obstacle is always going to be there no matter what, then the P in the WOOP is the plan. So let's embrace the fact that the obstacles are a part of the journey, but let's create a plan so that when that obstacle shows up, we're already prepared for it and we can work through it.
Gail, what stands out for me is quite often when you talk to couples, and you two, how long have you been married now?
It was 25 years.
25, a quarter of a century. And you know, you're great. I can say this. I know you probably, maybe you say it, I don't know, but you're, you know, exceptional parents. I love how you've raised your children and the mindset. And again, when we talk about, you know, how a family adopts something, you know, quite often you see a husband and wife don't always adopt something and utilize it with the same way, but you two have really taken some. Was it a struggle in the beginning? You know, because quite often when one half of the partnership learns something, they kind of want to throw it down the other one's throat, and it often results in quite a lot of resistance. You know, and let me teach you something. But how was it in the beginning? And we're going to get into what WOOP is and how you utilize it in all these different areas. But was it challenging in the beginning to sort of like join arms on this and really utilize it, or how was it for each of you?
Well, I think it was actually awesome. It was one of those, I think it was one of the steps that we were missing. So in the obstacle, so Shawn and I would sit down, we'd build our plan, we'd get excited about it, and we'd cannonball in, and then boom, like it wouldn't be maybe a week or so later that we'd be faced with a major obstacle. And it didn't feel like we were prepared for that, you know, before we learned the system. So I think as soon as we were taught what the second O is for obstacle, and instead of avoiding it and pretending like it's not going to happen, but instead embrace it, expect it, and plan for it, we loved this tool. And we both really welcomed it with open arms, because it was, I think, the piece that was missing for us as we were moving forward. So,
I suppose if I was to ask you this question, because a lot of people listening, if they haven't, especially if they haven't done a lot of work or haven't, or they felt stuck for a long time. Quite often the stuckness comes from when they bash their head against the first obstacle. Quite often a lot of people will just surrender, give in. They'll think it's the wrong path. They'll change course. A lot of things can happen when we hit those obstacles. But have you found, and it's certainly something I look at in my own life is, and in fact, I was writing about this. I didn't actually post it, but I was actually writing a post this morning. And a lot of it was around that, was, you know, some of the greatest challenges, some of the greatest obstacles, the greatest setbacks have not only been my greatest teachers, but afterwards, how I feel and the sort of the growing confidence, the growing certainty because of the obstacle, the setback, or the challenge. Do you find that too? Is that now you have this new relationship, when you see them, you kind of get a little excited about what's going to be on the other side of the obstacle?
Getting used to it, getting more comfortable with, excited, maybe not, but I'm expecting it and I'm anticipating it. So not quite as excited as you, because I do read your posts and I'm like, wow, okay, but I think I've learned to love it.
You're the one that reads my posts?
I read your posts.
I thought most people I look at all these girls who, you know, put half naked bodies on Instagram, and they write this beautiful stuff, and I'm wondering, maybe it's got to be topless before people read. I don't know. I thought I was wearing too many clothes.
No, your level of clothing's fine. You don't need to go topless.
Oh, you semi-naked, I know. That was a big obstacle there, right there.
Yeah, that was an obstacle, all right. There's a big obstacle my way there.
And Shawn, I just want to call this out, because I know that you know, you have a small challenge going on with your back, and so thank you, because I know it's hard to sit right now. I know I've been through that myself, so I just want to say thank you. So if you see him wiggling around, you know what's going on with his back there. Shawn, you know, this idea, I just asked KL the same question, and I think that if I ask you the same question, the juice that comes after the navigation of an obstacle or challenge, you really get that sense now. And I suppose that's why you're so passionate, not only about living it, but teaching it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's mostly because I think as human beings, you know, we look at the success stories and we see the end result. And a lot of times we think that it's just, we go from A to Z without any muck in the middle. But I think anybody who's gotten to the end, well, not even the end, we're not at the end either. But we're always evolving. But when you look back at the obstacles and overcoming those things, I think that's where all the richness actually comes from. You don't necessarily love it in the moment because you can't see, the end of it. But when you reflect back, it's like, that's where it all happened. That's where all the learning took place. And that's where all the, the breakthroughs and the feeling coming through that. So, I think for people, they might see the glory, right? But they don't know the story, and knowing that everybody moves through these. You can't create success without having some challenge along the way. And, speaking to what you had asked earlier with Kari-Lyn and I, like we've really embraced, like we really look at our partnership, our marriage as we're a team, right? So like when we do coaching, we actually decided to get coached together at the same time. We had a choice of being coached individually, but we thought it was really important. So we took these concepts on, kind of unified at the same time and incorporated at the same time, so that they were becoming a part of us, which, a lot of times in our relationship, when we did personal development, one would lead before the other. It was mostly Kari-Lyn leading as I was, skeptically following behind. So, she was the trailblazer there, but it's thank goodness. Thank goodness. So, but it's really like, to address that, I think that's where life is, right? Mm-hmm. Life isn't in the shiny thing at the end. Life is in the journey. Yeah. And I know that there have been lots of times in my life where I haven't appreciated the journey. I would say that right now I'm in a moment like where I'm not appreciating the whole journey, but I'm realizing that it's all here. Like when the lessons learned, I'll be on the other side of it and we'll be moving through, right? So it's just going through that process and really being clear about what's standing in our way. And again, avoiding the external reasons or obstacles versus what's running on the inside.
Yeah. That's going to be a big distinction that we sort of dive into. Before we sort of dive into it and sort of look at how the application and some of the lessons you've learned, one of the things that I feel like a lot of people avoid, they want to avoid real truth. And sort of, if I say something, sometimes people will be like, oh, you'll manifest bad things by focusing on what potentially can go wrong. Some people are caught up in this idea that because you're focused there, like when you focus on an obstacle, that somehow you manifest it. Now, in my world, what I've learned is that's absolutely not the truth. And I'm not afraid of actually really addressing a real issue with this sort of feeling that, oh yeah, because I'm talking about it, I'm going to bring it to myself. Would you want to talk a little bit about that, KL? When you sort of identify an obstacle and suddenly it shows up, what is the thing that you're feeling? What is that sense of, by addressing it, how is it preparing you differently from what was happening before you started using this principle?
Oh, it's a great question, David. And I love what you said before, but it's our greatest teacher. And I think if I can go in focused on that, knowing that it's my greatest teacher, what can I learn about this? I'm also a huge advocate for feeling the feelings. So I don't want to avoid feeling the feelings. So if I'm feeling fear and anxiety, I'm going to let those emotions happen, and I'm going to recognize I'm feeling that, but I'm going to notice it. And this is where contrast and tension are our greatest gifts. So when I'm feeling discomfort, fear, anxiety, and I'm thinking of probably the worst case scenario playing out, so I'm no longer in the present, I'm thinking in the future, and this is why I have fear of what could happen potentially, then I have to identify, so where do I want to be with this? And you always said, how long do you want to feel this way? I always remember this, but for me, it's just like, okay, I'm going to feel this, and then I'm going to look at the contrast and where do I want to go? And I believe, and we were just talking about this week, we create our experiences. We create our experiences. So I can approach the situation with fear and anxiety. Those are just thoughts, or I can go, wait a minute. So this contrast, here's what I'm feeling. So what would I rather be feeling right now? Well, what am I going to be learning through this? And then I just choose a different thought. I just choose a better thought, something that I feel more empowered with. So I haven't neglected or pretended I'm not feeling fear. I'm feeling it. And then I'm recognizing I don't, and a different thought. And then we move in that direction.
What about an example? Like, because you've gone through a couple of those.
Well, recently I was just sharing.
Now you're doing my job. I was just about to ask that. But
sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. I'm going to sit back and witness this, guys.
Okay. Well, just the recent example last week where I got a call and my mom was in the hospital again. So she was taken by ambulance and she was unresponsive. And we've been there with her before through the years. She's had some of these experiences. And I'm driving to the hospital. My first initial like knee-jerk reaction is fear and anxiety. I'm fearful of maybe this being the day that I lose my mom. And so I noticed the way I'm gripping the steering wheel and where my thoughts went. And I just had a big exhale. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm just, I am just going to choose a better thought because I don't want that thought to be my thought and waste my time. What if it's not? What if she's totally fine? But I just needed to create a new experience driving to there so that I'm not totally anxiety ridden. So I just said, you know what, I can't even wait to see my mom. I can't even wait to give her a kiss because we've been separated through lockdown. She's in a care home. So today is the day I get to see my mom and I just can't even wait to see her. And I just brought love and my whole experience changed. We didn't lose her, but everything about it. And what does she need? She didn't need me to show up with fear and anxiety. So it just shifted my whole experience of what that was, and I just had an incredible day. So it wasn't
That's I mean, really, we could spend the whole show just talking about this one concept because I think I recently posted when I was on my way to Greece that I missed my flight, and I felt that same thing driving to the airport, because the next flight to Greece was a week later. Yeah. And Asta was waiting in Greece already. And here I am missing the flight and watching as I pull up at the airport and just really collecting myself and noticing that when I walked into that airport with this present energy and was able to connect with the lady behind the desk and really ask her questions about her life and what's going on with COVID and not making the whole thing about me, she bent over backwards and went running to another airline and got me on a flight that ultimately got me to Greece. But if I'd walked in with that energy, the same way you talk about walking in that care home with that anxiety and fear and that projection of your own internal stuff, whereas that could have been the most, and for a lot of people, when you see them in those situations, they're missing everything because their mind is so far forward about, the potential outcome that often never happens, right? Shawn, do you want to jump in on this? Because I think that you probably have something to say about this before we get into WOOP.
Yeah, I do, because what I noticed from Kari-Lyn, and I think what was missing from the piece, is that she held her energy so well. And and you obviously did too. Like, the outcome could have been so different when you turned up the airport. But when you look at Kari-Lyn's mom being rushed to emergency and the way that Kari-Lyn approached it, well, she was treated by a number of doctors and nurses and people that were coming in and seeing this for the first time. And I remember Kari-Lyn sharing the story of their energy and their shock, and they're like, oh my God, like, she's in rough shape. She's not looking good. She's not going to make it. Like, this is crazy. Where Kari-Lyn was just holding the energy, and it would have been so easy to go down that rabbit hole. And, if you think about energy being infectious, like, we won't know, because Kari-Lyn held her energy and had more of an impact on the doctors and nurses in a positive way than them coming in with their fear and surprise having an impact on Kari-Lyn. What would be the long-term effect? What would have actually been the effect if Kari-Lyn would have gone down the rabbit hole on her mom's health? As she was laying there trying to get herself better.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if you could run it simultaneously, just so you could really see? I mean, imagine if we look at the scenario that you go in there completely anxious and distraught and in tears and fearful, and that rippling effect throughout everybody, which, obviously has a huge impact on the patient, right? So, I mean, I wonder if you could see both and you could watch them from above. I think a lot of people would start saying right before they start to, like, I love the idea of a rabbit hole, before they start to sort of disappear down a rabbit hole, that they choose, maybe I don't need that hole. Maybe I'm just going to stay right here in the moment and I'm going to look at and I love the fact, Kari-Lyn, that you used a physical cue to catch yourself. You looked at the tension in your hands on that steering wheel, which sort of allowed you to notice what was really the rest of the things that were happening, where your focus was. Do you want to touch on that anymore, Kari-Lyn, before we move on?
The only thing that I wanted to add to that, David, is that I've actually, as I said, we've been down this road a few times. So I've actually done the opposite as well. So the first time I got the call, and it would be years ago, but my mom struggles with a health condition. So when I got the call the first time, that was me driving in. I was absolute wreck. And I know what that experience is like, and I don't want to repeat it. So I feel like I've learned. So I've made the mistake, but I had to feel that, and I had to go through it the first time. And again, being our greatest teacher, right? Those experiences I can learn from. And how do I want this one to look different? So then I had the opportunity to create something new, where I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to, because, you know, sometimes we don't, but I happen to. So that was great.
I think a lot of people could take this on right now. In fact, I had a call the other night, 3 nights ago, a friend of mine, you know, has just been given 2 years. You know, he's fighting with cancer, and I just remember my response, you know, and being in that moment there of there was lots of ways to feel, and of course there's that initial. I know that he's been you know, fighting something right now, but to have that prognosis. And it's just like, all right, so this is going to be the best 2 years of your life, right? Starting now. And I just remember how I was feeling and what energy I was conveying to him. And then I asked this question. I said, one other thing. I said, you're an oncologist. Have there been any examples with this cancer of a survival? He said, yeah. She said, there's been 3 people over her years. I said, so you have both, the best 2 years and hope. So let's start there. And it was that immediate with how, and Shawn, you said that, you know, we can either affect or infect people all the time with our energy. And I love that concept of infecting people with our fear or our negative energy, or affecting people with our clarity and our presence and all these different things. So let's go into the W. If you could give examples about how you started out with WOOP and got sort of, or how you coach. Imagine that maybe you'll coach Kari-Lyn and sort of put us into the situation of how we bring WOOP into our sort of everyday life and how we can utilize it.
Yeah. So, I mean, most people, you know, they hear that idea, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 3 to 5 years, right? Like when we're talking about a big goal, in little, like in everyday, what do you wish for dinner? You know, like literally, what do you want for dinner, right? Because there's a process to create dinner but you know, we usually are working with our clients in like a bigger plan, and then we can break it down. Because once you
but hold on, let me just go back for a second. Just I think I missed what you just said there. You're saying that, yeah, we can utilize this in the big sort of, the big, you know, life-changing goals. However, there's something you can bring it down to. So what do you want for dinner? The wish is, oh yeah, we want to cook dinner tonight. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like, I mean, okay. It's like we want to cook a chicken dinner. Like there's this fancy dinner that Kari-Lyn wanted to create. So what's the wish? Well, it's a chicken dinner, right? Like it's this fancy dinner. And we have guests coming tonight for dinner, right? So, you know, what's the outcome? Well, it's going to be a great experience. You know, it's going to be delicious. We're going to be connected as friends. You know, all of these feelings, like just visualizing what it's going to be like to be in that connection. What's the obstacle?
I'll tell you the obstacle. We haven't got the groceries yet. I still have to go to the hospital to feed my mom, and my daughter just got a car. She wants to practice driving a stick shift.
A Mini.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, so how do I fit this in? And then when I'm clear on all the obstacles, that's where we come up with a plan. Okay, do you have the groceries? Okay, I can do this and this. So we want to make the wish happen, and we want that feeling. We want to really have this special time with our friends. So what do we need? What needs to be done? You know, and we would break it down.
So it's easy to stop at the fact that we don't have the groceries. Okay, so we can't make the chicken dinner, right? Like that would be a very rough example. Okay, well, we're out. So let's just order in Papa John's pizza. It'll be fine, right? But if we really create the plan, knowing, you know, like these different things, then we can overcome that. We can work together to make it happen. That's a very general look at it.
But you know, it's a great way to start someone off thinking, hey, I mean, anything we're doing, I mean, if we use those 4 steps, and that's a great example, really, for me, because it's like, as someone who loves to cook, and knowing that stuff gets in the way, and I love this divide and conquer. All right, listen, you go do that, I'll go do this, and you know, Mackenzie, you know, we can go help her. So the idea is that the plan really comes back down to that beautiful night, and as you're sitting there at the end of the night, and you have the connection, you have that great flavor, whether you cook it right or not, but you have this beautiful experience. And the journey to the experience, instead of having the obstacles become all stress loaded, you've got this other thing going on, which is a plan around these obstacles, which means that flowing into the dinner, you're not stressed out and you know, running around and thinking, and this can often happen. The idea of, yeah, well, let's have a beautiful dinner, and as you think, oh crap, why did I invite those people over? which can often be the thing that you end up with, right? It's like, oh shit, I wish I'd never invited them at all, right?
I think so. And you know, like, and I'm just kind of catching on to this right now. What's present for me right now in this conversation is, we know the obstacles are going to happen, and we know that we're going to have a plan around it. But if your outcome to that wish, the way you're going to feel, and just the excitement around accomplishing that thing and really having that come to fruition, like come true, if that's not strong enough to overcome the obstacle, it's not going to happen, right? But you know, the whole thing that's going to be making us work through the obstacles is that feeling that's resonating with us, to have that connection, you know, like picturing it, tasting it, you know, like really seeing it come together, so that, you know, when Kari-Lyn runs behind, you know, feeding her mom lunch, or, you know, I can't get the right this, or, you know, Kenzie wants to do that, and all the muck of the day comes together, the focus will still be, but I want to feel that at the end of the day, so this is worth it. Working through this is worth it. Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I think when we look in bigger, when we take that bigger to a 3 to 5 year plan, sometimes we set goals for ourselves where the outcome sounds really good, but how many of us really spend the time to feel what that would be like, so that when the obstacles show up, it's compelling enough to say, okay, this hurts right now, but I gotta be that. I have to achieve this in my life, because that's gonna be so great for myself, my wife, my family. I want that so bad. Yeah. That when that obstacle shows up, it's painful, but I see that with such clarity. And I think sometimes those big goals are hard for people to grab onto, because they're not as
well. And I think that, Shawn, if I were to say this, is that quite often when people start, depending on how we've trained our mind, and again, a lot of us don't know that we can actually reprogram, which is what you're doing with this. You start to reprogram yourself. Is a lot of people, what they do is that they only focus on the obstacle. Without not having clarity on what they want, and it's suddenly like the obstacle becomes the reason not to, versus what you're saying is, with greater clarity on step one, when you hit the obstacle, the sort of the tip and the balance is that there's a reason that's so clearly defined. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe I can add to that as well. Just on the flip side, we've worked with people who they say they have a wish. They don't really know how they want to feel. Like they throw a dart and they have a wish, like I want this or whatever. And they never take the action toward it, because they don't know the feeling, like what it's going to bring into their life. And so they're not really all in. And also the obstacles, they don't even think of what they could be. They just assume, oh man, that'll never happen. Like that is so far away. I could never do that. And so they never even try. They never immerse themselves in the process. But I love being able to, what is that big wish? Like what does it look like? And then viscerally, what does it feel like? What will it feel like? And you go through all the parts. What is it going to feel like for your family, for your kids, for yourself, for your, like whoever. So get that. They have to start really getting into that and feeling that. And then the obstacles, as you know, if they really are serious about it, they can look at, well, the biggest obstacle, and then they can start breaking it down into little mini obstacles. And then it always comes down to the intrinsic obstacle. It's like, do I believe I can do this? So those external obstacles are just things. They're just reasons that we put there that sound really, really good. And they would justify us for not.
Did you say excuses?
Sorry,
was I picking up another word there, lingering in the background? Is that what we're doing to ourselves?
I think it just comes back down to, it's our belief in self. It's our belief in, do we think we can do it? And what our obstacles are there around that, and what work can we do there to be able to break through that?
Yeah, I thought, Shawn, because we gave the example of a chicken dinner, maybe we can give the other extreme. So maybe even either a personal goal, or one of the clients that you've coached, or one of the team you've coached, where it has been, a significant outcome or a goal or wish that, that really is significant, that maybe would play out over 3, 5, 7, 10 years. Can you give us another example so we can hear the chicken dinner example pulled out on something much grander?
Yeah, I think it'd be easier for us just to transparently use ours. So like our ultimate wish when we were working with our coach, and still currently is to create a 7-figure annual income. So that was our That was our wish. And that's like, seems like this thing that's out there, right? That's, that would be wildly amazing. But so that was the W, but the O was the real thing, like the outcome. You know, why do we want $1 million? What a year? What would we do with the $1 million a year? So the process in really expanding the outcome was spending the $1 million. She had us like, okay, well, let's spend it. How would you spend it? And as we spent it, we realized like we got connected to the feeling of wanting to be more contribution. You know, wanting to leave a legacy for our kids, wanting to create security around, wanting to invest in more opportunities. Like, just like we started to break down what this money meant, instead of just like, oh, doesn't everybody want to make $1 million? Like, sure, that sounds good, right? Like, it was a lot different than that. It was more like, wow, we could really take care of a lot of people here. You know, like we could take care of ourselves so that we have a great life. But then with the overflow, we just have so much more that we can do with this. And when we made that clear of all the ways that it would impact our life, it just took on a different energy.
What did we find out though?
It wasn't enough.
It wasn't.
Yeah, we did actually find out it wasn't enough, but that's.
No, it wasn't enough, but we didn't know. I mean,
it wasn't enough a year? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it wasn't enough for the things that we wanted to do and contribute to, like the causes and the things that really felt on purpose for us. It wasn't enough. And had we not gone through that exercise, I mean, it sounds crazy, $1 million a year isn't enough. But when we wrote down what we wanted to do with it, we realized we better get to work because we've got a lot of things we want to do.
Well, it may sound crazy to some people. It doesn't sound crazy to me because, you know, with that much clarity, and remember where you're putting this energy. I mean, if I gave you $1 million, well, actually with you, because you do have a financial, if you haven't listened to some of our financial shows, Shawn's been a regular guest, and, you know, obviously you have financial literacy and you understand about money, but a lot of people think if they just won $1 million, that somehow it's going to change their life. But what we understand is that you have to grow into money, and $1 million, a lot of lottery winners are broker in 1 year or 2 years because of that. So we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But I am fascinated. What was the number you ended up with? If you started with $1 million and you started doing the exercise around, okay, let's spend it and see what we really need to create the legacy. Remember, legacy and contribution were the two biggest things you spoke about: protecting the family, about creating a legacy, and legacy income which is where your money is making money, you know, and it really does continue to make money. It's like building a golden goose and it continues to lay eggs, which I'm guessing part of that legacy is that. What was the number you ended up with?
Well, we actually we continue to work towards that number, and then have it like, then we will expand it from there. So we didn't like say, oh, we need 1.39, you know, like we didn't get to that point, but I like that. Yeah,
I think we should go the next step.
Of course you should do that. Yeah. Because what happens is if it's 1 point, I remember when I set a goal, I wanted to make $1 million in a month. I know it sounds crazy, but it was just it was just a stretch. It was like, what do I have to do? Who do I have to be? What has to be in play to make that happen, right? And it was just, but it made making a smaller amount of money or $1 million a year seem quite relatively easy in comparison to what I was trying to do with this other thing, right? So let's go back then. So the W part, what's some of the hurdles? And again, we're not going to go into each part so deeply. I think we could do another show on it, but let's just go into that wishing part, because a lot of people, have lost the art of dreaming, and dreaming is different from setting a wish or a desire that you're having a plan to bring into reality. Some people sit and daydream all the time. But what's something you're learning there, Shawn, that is, or Kari-Lyn, that around this first stage, or stage 1 and 2, that really could help people who are going to sit down and try this?
Well, maybe I'll just jump in and say that it doesn't have to be that $1 million dream. Like maybe the first one is create an extra $500 or $1,000. Maybe it's just a little bit of better health. Maybe it's like to be able to have their child go to private school, or take the lessons that you'd never be able to afford, or go to the school. Maybe it's for your college education fund for your kids. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be the big grand plan. And I think that's the thing. It could be the chicken dinner, right? It could be, but what is the thing? And
it could even be like a better relationship with your kids. It doesn't even have to be financial, or your spouse.
Just kidding.
Your spouse who's got a back
You-
problem. That's a hard one to be.
you recording this?
Hey, 25 years, it's looking good. Yeah,
Always
I do like that. And actually what went through my head is like, I was thinking about musical instruments because I can see them in the background here. You know, I mean, really, if someone wanted to learn an instrument, I mean, you could have that same play out because a lot of people don't do it because of the obstacle, right?
Yeah.
You know, but that sense of being able to sit and play a saxophone, you know, in a jazz bar that you just walk into, that feeling would be awesome. But the obstacle is, for a lot of people, time. I don't have the time. You know, what all those kinds of things, right? Do you want to carry on with that, Shawn? What was your sense with 1 and 2, or Kari-Lyn? What's the 1 and 2? What gets in the way?
Oh, for obstacles?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, do you want to start with this, or?
Or you can start, I'll jump in.
Okay. So like for me, like if we're getting into the nuts and bolts of it, because we won't have time to expand and really go through process, but I would say that where most people start, David, is with an external excuse. Like, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. You know, my kids are too busy. I'm not lucky. The opportunities don't present themselves. You know, if I'm in a business, my team, I don't have the right people. You know, like it's an external excuse. But what we find when we keep asking the right questions, so tell me more about that, and tell me more about that, and as we peel the layers of the onion down, when we get to the center of it, it's usually a conversation that we have with ourselves. And it's usually, surprisingly enough, it comes from a piece of belief around I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough. It seems to be like humanity. It's amazing how many times, like without being connected to people, like we'll have like separate conversations. It comes into a worthiness piece or a good enough piece or a lovable piece. Sometimes it's a lovable piece, but like mostly it's I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. And it takes a real brave person to be able to allow themselves to go to that level, to really acknowledge that. But when you get to that underlying piece of this belief piece, then you have something to work with, because that's the truth. You know, that's the conversation that people have with themselves. So if you're aware of it, right, that's the obstacle, that this is going to come up, this conversation, I'm not worthy. So I'm going to have this behavior, this behavior, this behavior, which are the excuses that pop up. When I recognize the excuse and know what's underneath it, what's the plan to get around, like get through that? Because we know what's going to come up. It's what's driving us, right?
So does the person, and I'm just asking you because I know you know, but does the person just automatically get to that unworthiness piece? So if it's a saxophone player and it's like, oh man, I just don't have time, or, you know, I wish I could, I just need to practice way too much, or I'm really bad, or whatever. So what happens in the conversation that brings them down to anchor, peels all the layers back and gets to the root of maybe it's a worthiness piece or I'm not good enough?
Well, usually it's a conversation that we're having with the person. So it's kind of like this facilitated conversation that we have, but were you thinking something else? Like how would somebody self-direct themselves into that?
Yeah, well, I was just like when David's, you know.
I'm loving this. I can sit back and I could switch my, we could record you two interviewing each other. It'd be awesome. I love this. Carry on. This is great. Good stuff. I love it.
So you just switched it on me, but I loved how you're explaining it. And actually, I find you're very masterful at funneling the questions into helping people really discover for themselves. And it is a self-discovery. So it's not Shawn telling them you're unworthy, like you're not deserving. It's not that at all. It's like tell me more about that and how do you feel? And I just, you do a beautiful job. But then all of a sudden, there's an emotion that comes out, and you know you've touched on it when you've hit a bit of emotion, it's like, oh my God, like I don't think that I'm good enough. I don't think I could ever do that. I can't actually see myself playing.
Yeah. Okay. So I got where you are now. So I think it's about following the breadcrumbs, right? So tell me more about that. What we start to see, and we can see with ourselves, we could actually self-direct us through if we ask ourselves, or we're brave enough to ask ourselves the right question, be truthful with it. It's like looking for patterns of when else this shows up. When do these excuses show up in other areas of our life? When else has this happened? And then layering it back to, you know, like when has this happened in the past? And, you know, maybe for most people, it's something that's happened in their childhood that's kind of been one of those life-defining moments where they were told something or something happened when their internal conversation was, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, or whatever it is. And you know, that's where the emotion that Kari-Lyn's talking about, which is great. I mean, if we can come to that place, then we can see that really all these excuses are like, they're all bullshit. Like it's all just created from our own headspace around what we told ourselves when we were younger, right? And
sorry, carry on.
I was just gonna say, I just feel like this is the place where in most trainings, you know, like, you know, we do a why you'd want to create an outcome training. You know, if it doesn't make you cry, you don't know your why until it, you know, makes you cry type thing. Like, yeah, that's all great, but we have to understand what stands in our way because we could have the greatest why. I love my kids and blah, blah, blah. But if I'm standing in my way and then I can't identify that and work through it, it's really tough to hit those goals, right? Like we have to be able to get through that.
I think it's not only just tough to hit them. I think it's tough to decide on them. If you have, you know, if you're always standing in your own way, and you know, I say this, you know, I've trained over 1 million people, and it always seems to come down to two things, like you say, self-love and self-worth. You know, and it doesn't matter. I mean, Kari-Lyn, if I look back to when I first met you, and here you are from, I mean, gorgeous, athletic, brilliant, great marriage, beautiful kids. But still, the challenge was still what was going on. And I'm not saying just you, I'm using you because other people are watching. And it's so easy for someone watching to look at your external life and not understand that your internal mind was something that you really worked on a lot of, I mean, for many, many years to get to this clarity. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Self-sabotaging. And I never knew why. I kept finding myself in the same cycle. And that's when Shawn asked the question, as we go through the WOOP, where else has this showed up in your life? And it does. It shows up in all areas. And wouldn't it be incredible if we could really get to the root of it? And then it changes. It has the ability to impact all areas of our life. And that's why this tool can be so powerful when you go deep like that, or it can be about the chicken. Like it's both are good.
And I think it doesn't matter, like it, just so that the people that are watching this, David, understand, like just because we know what our obstacle is and just because we have a tool doesn't mean that we're like figured this out, right? We still every single day we're always in the muck too, right? Because we're always wanting to move forward. But what's different, I guess, about where we're at right now is we understand where it's coming from, so we can deal with it sooner. And we have a tool in place that we can work through it. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to go through the problems.
You kind of preempted my question, which is so great that you did that, which you constantly do, which I love. But it's the idea, though, you know, now, and so let's lead through this. So you're using this. I don't like the word technique. It's really a life skill that you're developing, because technique is something, you know. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's short-lived. You're talking about embedding a philosophy into everyday decisions that move you forward in life, with a level of honesty and transparency and understanding of self, understanding of our own limitations, of our own cycles, that sort of, you know, where we keep banging our head on the same thing. But talk about that a little bit, Shawn. Again, we don't have too much longer in the show, but talk a little bit about that, maybe, and both of you, but the idea that even though you have it, and let's say this 1 million or 7 figures a year, and you're going down that road, and how often are you revisiting, you know, the wish? How often are you looking at the obstacles? How often are you looking, you know, at your outcome? I mean, are you constantly revisiting that? Is it something you do once a week, once a month? You know, have you changed the wish in alignment with what the outcomes are? Just give us a little bit of a sense of how's it feel when you're actually putting this into practice, especially with something as large as that.
Yeah, well, and Kari-Lyn will share hers because we're individuals, right? We have a common goal, but we're going to tackle it different because we both have different internal obstacles, right? But for me, I feel like so this process has become a part of me, David. So like, I don't really think about it a lot of times, but I'm thinking about it all the time. So like, I would say that every day, you know, every day there's something that's happening where I'm like almost compartmentalizing it into the process. You know, like, where is this showing up? What is this? Why is this showing up for me? Is this an obstacle? All right. Why am I, you know, like, why am I acknowledging that? What's happening inside? Am I like feeling this way? So if my behavior is just something that I'm always taking things in and thinking, is this moving me towards my goal or is this moving me away from my goal? you know, and there's a number of different ways to be able to be creating something. So the idea of, is it the same as it was a couple of years ago? Well, the outcome is the same or very similar, but the process or the journey to get there doesn't necessarily have to be the same, because things show up and it's like, okay, thank you, that's an opportunity here. That may not be how I thought it was going to go in terms of my plan, but this is going to be a great step to move towards where we want to go. So we'll take that positive step. And then the negative piece, or the obstacle that shows up, or, you know, something that happens that I'm going to go, oh, for God, like an excuse. And I start pointing my finger, right? This sucks, this sucks, this sucks. I can catch myself and go, okay, hang on. Let's have a look at this. What's really happening, right? Am I doing what I need to do? Am I following my plan? Because it's easy to kind of get off the road a bit, but then acknowledging that and getting back on the road. So I would say for me, it's a daily thing.
So I'm going to jump on that, because the road thing, get off track. So I need to have it everywhere. I need to have it so I can see it, feel it every day, because what I focus on, I get really, really excited about, and it becomes my number one. What I find is I get distracted. I feel like I'm a mom and I have a lot of responsibility, and I have a mom that needs a lot of care and attention. And I feel like this sandwich, right? Not excuse, but my reality. So I have to be so disciplined to be able to keep the blinders on, because as soon as I feel like I'm a part of everything, I lose track. I go off. Like, my journey is this for sure. But what I know, we were just talking about this, is whatever we pour energy into, we see results. And so it's like,
well, negative and positive, right? I mean, a lot of people pour energy into a negative thing and they're going to see results. Not results they want, but they're definitely going to get a result.
It's so true. It's so true, David. So whatever, if I'm focusing on the negative, and can I say shit on the shithole? Like, if I'm focused on—
You can't say shit. Sorry, no. Please don't say shit on the show.
Well, that's what starts showing up even more, right? So for
I was
me,
joking.
I need to have it around. Like, I need to just, the feeling for me drives me. So I need to remember.
And that's that self-awareness. I mean, self-understanding is that. But I want to go back to why you were giggling there, because I think you and I thought the same thing as she said that. Do you want to, Shawn, do you want to talk about that? What came up as she said that?
Why? Because I was going to ask, hey, tell me more about that.
Oh dear. All right. I suppose I want to talk about the plan part, because, you know, if we stand out, you know, we have the wish, the outcome, the obstacle, and then we put a plan in place. How often are we revisiting the plan in alignment with the wish? Because, you know, sometimes you can set out a plan, and as you start, like, let's say, sandwich between two things. And let's say that suddenly you need to dedicate 70% of your time to your mother. So you may have the greatest plan on earth, but because of some external force that isn't an excuse, it's a reality of life that you're responding to. How often are you going back and revisiting sort of the plan and making little tweaks and adjustments, and then, or are we changing? Give me a sort of a real sort of time look at, you know, how the plan moves and adjusts to reality and truth versus excuses and obstacles. Hey, did I lose you? Well, it looks like we lost them. Not sure why. We're going to see. Let me just see. Let me just see. Hold on there, everyone. Why is that? Make host. Remove. I'm not sure what's going on there. I think they're going to call right back in. Here they are.
Oh,
there you go.
Oh boy.
No, that was good. Was that me?
I think that was just the universe conspiring against us.
That was good. Everyone, this is the reality of live television, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are. That was good. So do you remember the question? Oh, I think it's their internet.
Not. We're kind of in and out. So
let me just check something. I think it's on your end. I think it's the internet. But let's use this as a wrap up, because obviously we're getting some interference right now. But going back to the plan idea, and then I'm going to ask you one final question. Can you sort of answer that idea about how often are you revisiting and retweaking the plan?
I would say again, it's daily. It's it's one of those things where, you know, the plan's going to evolve based on what we need for support. So if we plan for Kari-Lyn, knowing that Kari-Lyn's mom's going to go to the hospital once in a while, we have a plan in place, you know, like what are my responsibilities going to be in that, so that she can take 70% of her time and go there without us really truly missing a
beat. Yeah, we've got a
and I think we're fortunate enough to know that it doesn't take much. So I could put some effort in, like, and I do. So every day we always say every day we do something to move our business forward. So we never are out. We never stop. Every day we commit to doing something. And I think that's the difference. No matter what is happening, I could do one thing, right? And so I think that's another way to just count on each other and trust that we have the same intention and we're moving forward.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you a last question, because your internet is sort of coming and going right now, and we did know that in advance that you were having a few challenges. Would you like to sort of like think about this sort of, you know, we talked about a lot of things here, and it really is quite simple. I love it. If I go back to the chicken dinner, saying, you know, where do you build the muscle? How do you practice? Practice with those small things and build it into a larger thing. Obviously, you're great coaches, but what's the sort of a last thing? If someone says, hey, I really love this, and I want to start to adopt this, what's some advice you'd give, or last thoughts you'd give, or a starting point? You know, how would you like to sort of advise and leave this call?
I think for me, it's practice, just like any skill. You know, if you're going to incorporate it, do it, and do it in all areas of your life. So if you want something, wish. What is my wish? Oh, outcome. How am I going to feel as a result of that? Obstacle. What is the thing that's going to stand in my way? P, what's my plan for it when it shows up? It's like, it's literally like every single thing that we can do in our life, we can do that. So it's like a lot of people will take them through the process for their 3 to 5 year plan. That's the last time they'll look at it. Right. But unless they like are willing to kind of go through, so everything that shows up or everything that we want in our life, like, I just feel like it just goes into my head and it spits out a W, it spits out an O, it spits out an O, it spits out a P. And then on I go. Like, it's almost unconsciously competent now with it, right?
Yeah. How long have you been utilizing this, Shawn?
Well, we've been using it for about 2 years now.
Awesome. And Kari-Lyn, do you want to sort of give us your final thoughts to people listening, right? And remember, this self-worth piece and self-love piece, I always think about that person sitting there, whether it's a man or a woman, who is so sort of under the, you know, the picture they have of themselves. Often the lens is so cracked and broken that it's very, very hard to even start to wish again and start to see that, you know, all of that stuff going on, that self-belief has come through experiences, things we heard, saw, and experienced as a child or a younger person that we now live into. So I just want to sort of, you know, give you that permission to talk to that person as well, who really is struggling already with how they see themselves, without discovering more of how these things continue to show up in their WOOP plan, right?
Well, I would say to that person, what are you willing to do? And how long are you willing to do it for? Because I think no matter where you begin, if I'm not willing to do anything towards that wish and towards that goal, then I need to pick a different wish. I need to pick a different goal. Okay, so I would just ask that person, like, what are you willing to do and for how long? Because if you're willing to do it just for a week, pick a different wish. You need to be willing to do this until. So yeah, and just have patience. Make a decision as well. So not wishy-washy, be really clear on what it is that you want. So, and if you don't know, spend some time, even that contrast and tension. If what's showing up in your life is what you don't want, write that out and do the opposite. What is the opposite of this, right? And then now you have your list of what maybe you want, and you're going to find something in there. So be clear on what it is that you want and make the decision. And then just, what are you willing to do and for how long? And so practice, don't give up. So just keep practicing.
And I just want to build one last thing on what Kari-Lyn just said, because I just realized as a coach, like as a athletic coach, I don't take somebody who's just starting to play volleyball and ask them to do something that I'd expect of a university student or a player, right? That doesn't make any logical sense. And I think that sometimes when we're just starting and we're asking for a big audacious goal, it's a challenge. So if I think about the law of progression, You know, if I was to speak to the person who's just starting out, look for evidence that this works. Start simple. Start with something that's more achievable and just go through the process of a wish and an outcome and an obstacle. So you can get the little wins and build the muscle so that you understand how the tool works. And then you can work your way into a bigger one, perhaps, you know, like just thinking about skill. And, you know, maybe that's a way. We haven't had experience working with a lot of people from, like, say, the ground up like that. But just think in this conversation, I would think that would be a very logical place. Like, start small and work your way up, right? Once you understand and you get the evidence that it's working for you.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I always use that term default mode. You know, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, how often we sort of pull back into our default mode. One thing before you go, because I could just imagine, you said something at the very opening sentence and we didn't touch on it, but I think so many people are parents. Can you give one example each of how you're utilizing this with your teens and with your children and how that shows up? Because I do think it's been very successful in your entire family. It's not something that you're just using alone, but you did mention we can use it with our children. Do you want to just give us an example of that before we go?
Yeah, we've got some examples, but with our son, like with Christian, it's like university. So he's pivoting from one area into another, and there's some obstacles coming up for him. And so it's like getting him to really think of what he wants. Like, what does he want? And he doesn't know. So he needs to take some time to really get clear on what it is that he wants and what's the outcome he's looking for. And right now he's confused and he's thinking it seems so far away. And do I really want to do this? So for him, we work him through, you know, and then what are the obstacles to getting into that program? And then let's make a plan. So where does it start? And it actually started with a phone call that he made yesterday. It took a long time to get him to take the first step and actually pick up the phone and have a conversation. So that's happened. And then with Kenzie, it was again, like, things are looking different for her, but we'll say volleyball, and she's looking to go down into the States and play. Well, since this, you know, COVID hit and everything is changing, and it feels to her, she's devastated. It feels like her world is crashing down, her hopes and dreams. So it's like, well, really, let's have a look at what are your options. So what do you want? What do you really want? And looking through how we can work through, you know, what's available to her and what is she willing to do for that. So I think for both of them, it just provided some clarity and some steps, some immediate action steps that they could take, you know, to be able to work through it.
And even her car, you know, is another one. You know, she really wanted a car, and it was a real challenge. And you know, we bought her the car, but she's actually paying us back a big percentage of that car. But she had to, like, overcome some obstacles to be able to have the ability to pay us back that money. And what I'm finding with both of those cases that Kari-Lyn said with the kids is that it's the internal obstacles that are the most fascinating part. You know, like, yeah, COVID's on. Yeah, this is happening, but what's really going on there that's preventing you from getting that scholarship?
Yeah.
Okay, like, I get, you know, you're working, I get you're taking a gap year, but what's really stopping you from being able to, like, find out what you're passionate about and going to school? Like, what's really there? And it's been a fun, like, for me, it's kind of like, isn't that interesting? Like, it's just, what's the, because you see it with your kids, and it's, you know, we have a pretty good idea, but it's their self-discovery that's the most important part, right?
Yeah. I'm so glad we ended with that. It was a beautiful way to tie a bow on this. And beautiful car, by the way. It suits her. And I love the fact that you decided to let her drive stick, or she decided. I'm not sure who decided that, but it was one of the things I said with my kids. I would help them. I paid half their cars, but I said, but it has to be a stick, because I always wanted them to learn a stick, because if they travel, it's in Europe, you can't rent typically automatics. But more importantly, it's very hard to have a phone in your hand when you're driving a stick. There's a lot of reasons to do it, right? So, but listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. But Shawn, I know your back isn't great today, and I've been there, and I just appreciate you being here and being so present. And you, KL, thank you so much. Remember, those of you listening, you know, going back to Shawn's words about, you know, those starting small and building this muscle. And a lot of you who are listening have done a lot of work and have, you know, and personal development, and you have a higher awareness. So even applying, you know, the principle to sort of everyday life and to those large goals, but using the muscle on a daily basis. And that's what the whole show's about, my extra mile, those tiny small things we can do on a daily basis to enhance and improve and to really design the life of our dreams. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for being a part of it. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to join the chat. Ask questions about this one, because I'm happy to bring these guys back. If there's lots of questions around this, we want to dive into it more. We'll get them back to come back and talk about this in more depth. And we'll definitely see you on the other side.